Hello, everybody. I'm Sarah. I'm going to launch right into a video. And it might play. There we go. More volume. So that is rapid fire, sort of my work over the past few years. I'm Sara Blake, but I'm kind of created this moniker Zoe a few years ago, and my sort of internet identity is Hello Zoe. I'm Hello Zoe on all the internet things. So I wanted to start out showing you a whole bunch of work really quickly because the first part of the talk is going to be a little bit more of setup about finding your creative swagger, I guess, in really simple things like your childhood or just asking yourself really simple questions. But I want to start out by saying, of course, thank you to Mark and family and to all of you guys for coming out and listening and being here. And here are some things that we will cover. We will cover my very bad handwriting. This is going to be all handwritten, a handwritten presentation. A couple of rhetorical questions that hopefully you can ask yourself as a creative person, a maker, whatever your discipline is. A couple thoughts borrowed from psychology and just people that I look to creatively, and very technical graphs. If you can't already tell, they're going to be super technical, hand-drawn. And a couple random points, which will just sort of flow into whatever we're seeing in the illustration, and they're going to be starred like this. And I'm just going to start out with something very obvious and basic, but it's sort of the core of everything that motivates me creatively. You must love what you do. Most of us probably have bills we have to pay. We need things like food and shelter and rent. And sometimes our vocation doesn't directly coincide with our occupation. So if you find yourself in that situation, and I think most of us do at some point in our lives, you must find a way instead to do what you love. And what that means is really finding those things outside your obligations. And I think that's something we have to actively seek in order to be satisfied as human beings, especially if we're innately creative human beings. And sometimes that means sacrifice, and for me that mostly happened in the form of sleep sacrifice. So you must do what you love. And I really believe this, and I don't even know that I initially knew what it was that was at the core of what was driving me. I came up with this silly name that really means nothing, Zoe, but it's the Z, S, and O just stand for very sort of random things that are personally significant. But what I liked about it was the Z and the S come together to form a little heart. And the O is just sort of a period on that symbolizes things coming full circle, or or the universe maybe. So I really believe that everything comes down to love, and that's our core inspiration. And a couple of very smart people seem to also believe this. All you need is love, John Lennon. And where there is love, there is life, Gandhi. And I should clarify, I don't mean romantic love, it can be. But I just mean the reason we wake up in the morning is for the hope of an experience of art or activity or food or something that makes us feel alive. And I think that drives whatever we make, whether we're a coder, an illustrator, an artist, whatever it is that you like to do. So let's go to the bar scenario. A stranger asks you what you do at a bar. It's a Friday night. You walk into your favorite bar. You just want a quiet drink. And a stranger inevitably asks you what you do. Well, I'm a designer, but right now I'm working on this children's book, and I really want to have my own illustration studio. And that's what I would do for probably the past 10 years. And I sort of had an identity issue because I had a designer background and I was an illustrator, but I was mostly working on personal work. And I started started putting myself in the bar situation, just rhetorically speaking, over the past few years. I realized a lot of other people, like creative people that I really looked up to, kind of did the same thing or had the same sort of insecurity. So now I've started asking myself and asking others, not what do you do, but what do you like to do? And this sort of gets to, my talk is called Be a Snortvart. So this sort of gets back to what do you like to do, and asking yourself that as a kid. So over the years, I've been an illustrator, I've been an art director, I've been a designer, graphic designer, interactive designer, an artist, which scares me the most because it seems so meaningful, and my stuff is not really that deep. But I look back to this book that my first book, probably my greatest work I've ever done when I was in first grade, called The Snortvart. And my mom sent this to me over the summer. And I really think that maybe our first grade selves just really hold the key to all of our style. They're our true tastemakers. So if you have your creative block, I just like to look at my kid drawings, and I'm so jealous of my first grade imagination. I wish my brain still worked this way. And I wish that all of us still function as kids where we weren't brainwashed by the concept of failure yet. And so in this story of the Snortvart, I'll give you the cliff notes here. Basically, there's this strange little forest creature that is born to Mama and Papa Deer, and there's a debate within the forest when Brady the Snortvart arrives, whether he should be banished from the forest, and they would do this by leading him onto the hunter's territory and letting things work themselves out, which was very dark, I realize now, for a first grader. There's this whole debate, and at the end of the day, Mama Deer, of course, wins, because moms always win the debates, and Brady stays with the Deer family and goes to school. And when he goes to school, of course, he's ridiculed and has a very hard time initially, but he starts cultivating all of his passions and his love of studying, of his art class. Of course, first grader Sarah was very interested in art, so Brady was very good at art class. And sort of the moral of the story was that Brady gains all this respect and friends from pursuing his passions. And I guess first grader Sarah really knew it was up and knew what she liked to do. And so what do I like to do? What do I like to do in my bar situation? I like to draw. I knew this when I was 5. I knew this pretty much all through my childhood. It was very simple. My favorite thing to do was drawing. And my second favorite thing was to collect bugs. Naturally. And I was really obsessed with going in my backyard. I grew up in Virginia in the States, and when I was a kid, we had this thing called we had the 17-year locust molt. You guys maybe have it here as well. I don't know if it's a southern thing or if it's a local sort of phenomenon, but every 17 years, these thousands of locusts come out of the ground to molt and to shed their shell. And as a kid, there's nothing cooler than going around and seeing all these like ghost-like exoskeletons of these cicadas all around my backyard, and I would collect them and put them in jars and just really study them. And they were so fascinating because they were like ghosts of living beings, but they had vanished and they were existing somewhere else out in the world. So I became really fascinated with drawing bugs. And so later in my life, I did a lot of obsessively drawing bugs, and arguably they still look like a kid drew them, which I will take as a compliment. And I got really obsessed with drawing nature. And I think this is kind of universal. We all think nature is beautiful as organic creatures ourselves, but I think I was particularly obsessed with drawing nature, especially like leaves and things that were on sort of a ground level for me, because I was pretty nearsighted. I'm still very nearsighted, but when I was a little kid, I couldn't see very well, and I had a bunch of corrective surgeries when I was about 2 years old. So this is my mom's collection of all my little baby glasses. And so anyway, I wasn't very good at making friends, so I found a lot of my comfort and satisfaction through doing solo activities, drawing, and examining my world on a very ground level. Which leads me to random point number 2. For all of us, I think that we can actually make what we perceive as just our weaknesses, maybe turn that into our unique perspective, or perhaps even our strength. And we all have one, so ask yourself, what is yours, and why does that make you special? And for me, that was my lack of sight, which is a weird thing for someone to then pursue all strictly visual things. And so I've carried this sort of perspective in my little cicada frame of mind into my adult life and how I make illustrations now. And I obsessively catalog textures, ugly textures, things that I just find interesting and I can't leave on the street without taking a picture of. I catalog them from all my travels or just walking around my home in New York City. And they make their way into my drawings. And to you guys, maybe this just looks like a silly version of a Korean tiger, but for me, it's a sort of a way of scrapbooking my world into my illustrations. And I'm probably the only one that knows that this is a concrete texture from a chilly night when I was walking around in Sydney, and I had kangaroo skewers and got a little tipsy with the bartender drinking Australian beer, and that's a memory for me, and it's infused in this art in a way that probably no one else would ever know, and that's really something special about the digital and the analog meshing. So just grungy brick in the Lower East Side, dripping graffiti paint, and it sort of feels like shadows of memory in that way. And also sometimes it's just about remembering a cool day, walking around, like having a chat with a friend and having a coffee, and you just snapped a picture, and now you can remember it when you look at that weird bug you drew. Texture is a treasure hunt, and it's like I think it's about simplifying your world too. When you walk around texture hunting, it's like narrowing your world through just a viewfinder, and setting constrictions on how you view your environment. And I do this wherever I go. This was downtown Cincinnati. I was at an off festival with James Patterson, who spoke yesterday. And on the off time, I was just kind of wandering around and kind of exploring my environment. And this was a very boring street, not much going on. And it's kind of forlorn. But you get up close and you start exploring, and there are all these adventures happening. All around dripping paint, sanded wood, and then this arrow, this vacant street, nothing. It wouldn't make me look twice in any other circumstance. But then this arrow is prompting me to look closer, and as you get closer, you find all of these ravines and canyons and these scars, and it's suddenly very interesting once you go micro, and sort of zooming into these situations delights my imagination as someone who can't see very well. But it's also a way of giving yourself superpowers. It's a way of zooming in, and this, of course, is not a photograph that I took. This is a satellite view of mountains, but it's a way of going micro to macro and sort of empowering your imagination. So that's sort of a rough overview of childhood to adulthood and where the creative fuels came from. So this is the point where I'm now an adult, right? I have to show you some very technical graphs made with software I can't pronounce the name of. Very technical. So I was pretty much a freeloader up until I went to school. And when I went to school, I had this vague idea I wanted to be an artist. But I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know how to make money. I thought that meant you lived in overalls and ate beans out of a can, and so I basically, through my parents' advice, got an internship working in a digital agency, and I learned everything about computers, like really basic stuff on the job, and I just continued on this path of being an interactive designer and art director, and started doing the stuff I loved on the side, which was great because it took all the pressure off of, getting jobs or pleasing anyone. And so this is sort of just how Zoe Studio formed, just after-hours projects. And then eventually, I'm totally fast-forwarding, but 5 years of doing that, and then it suddenly seesawed where I could do less of the agency work and more of the illustration. But I sort of feel a responsibility to say this. There's this idea that illustrators or creative people that have lots of personal work make all their food money and shelter money from doing that work, and that's just not true. I actually have really had to work on my balance, my creative balance. And something James said yesterday that really struck me too is he has a similar scenario where there's cross-pollination of the agency work and the client projects that feed into the personal work. And so I kind of decided that this is the graph I want to measure my personal creative success by. This is the past 10 years. The word sleep in this graph is kind of a joke because it can be easily substituted for the word time or happiness or freedom or fulfillment. 10 years, not much has changed in the space or money. Money comes and goes, and that little dip in space was probably when I moved in New York and gained 10 square feet. So it's an act of constantly asking yourself these questions. How do I want to spend my time? How will I seek and pursue my creativity? What do I want to make? And who am I making it for? And hopefully the answer to that last question is you, because you're the one making the investment. And you're the one that you ultimately need to please. So now I'm going to show you a real graph. This is by Mihaly. Anybody help me with the name? Mihaly is a Hungarian psychologist, and he has this concept of flow, where people are most happy when they're in a state of concentration and involvement with their activity at hand, and nothing else seems to matter in their world. And this is the graph. And it's particularly interesting, I think, because it's also subjective. You have your perceived challenge and your perceived skill. And if you perceive the challenge to be too great, you're anxious. And if you have more skill than the activity requires, then you're bored. And then there's this magic space of flow in between. He describes this feeling, this flow state, as being completely involved in an activity for its own sake, and the ego falls away. Time flies. Every action, movement, and thought follows inevitably from the previous one, like playing jazz. Your whole being is involved, and you're using your skills to the utmost. So composers have this, athletes have this, artists have this, CEOs and business people have this. Anyone can have this. And to me, this is the sexiest, most desirable creative pursuit. This is amazing. I want this feeling all the time. So trying to merge that idea with childhood Sarah, I'm just going to go into some work and sort of show you how basically I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm just chasing that feeling of awesome and flow and happiness through all my work, and hopefully also show how just doing what I love, whether it's good, bad, not going to put labels on anything, leads to being creatively fulfilled, but also getting those client jobs. And 90% of my work is personal work, but 100% of that 10% that is client work came all through just doing my own stuff. So I'm going to take you into work in progress, personal client. And also, just to give you some background, all of my work is drawn in pencil, sometimes ink. Watercolor is put over top for texture. I'm a terrible painter. I just like it because it's sort of, watercolor helps me sort of lose control intentionally. And sometimes you can spend 10 hours drawing something and you lay the watercolor over and you completely ruin it, and that's sometimes awful and sometimes really great. It's just relinquishing control. And then that's all brought in to Photoshop and then color digitally. And I'll show you, you're being very patient so far with no drawings, but I'll show you some video screen caps of all the digital process. So now lots of pictures. As I said, I got really obsessed with a couple subject matter, pieces of subject matter. So this work is mostly type, bugs, birds, girls, and portraits. And people tell you not to repeat yourself. I say definitely repeat yourself, because it's those movements in small increments that equals evolution. that you can see in nature. These are peacock feathers and butterfly evolutions. So I just draw the same shit over and over and over. And these are just some googly bugs that I've sort of drawn through for various projects over the years. And they're not very technical. Some parts of them definitely look like a kid drew them. But it's all about play for me. And literally, this was for a show called Play. It was in Cincinnati. The organizer who does the Off Festival did a show called On, where you could play with all the art. And this was cut into a puzzle, and you could play with it in the museum. And I've just sort of gotten mesmerized by drawing little creatures, which then turn into drawing jellyfish, which turn into drawing plants, which then totally digress into drawing weird, filigree, abstract, nature-y things, which then sometimes turn into jobs, which is super awesome. And this was an identity for a developers conference called Code Garden in Copenhagen. And stuff that you just are doing because you are just, something drives you to make it, and it makes you happy. Suddenly, it's helping to your vocation is becoming your occupation. And this was Identity website. And then, super cool, it's behind like these really smart, awesome people giving talks, and it's having a life out in the world. So there's this element of play and this element of the unexpected and improvisation. And I've really liked, I really like automatic drawing, where you sort of just put your pen to the paper and see what happens, and it's improv and meditation all in one. And I find if you give yourself constraints, I'm not a typographer, but I love to draw typography because you give yourself a structure, and then all the space in between is free to play with. And I never know what these structures will look like when I start them. Color, shape, I know none of this, but if you just set down your pencil to the paper, you get these little surprises. So I started doing this with the alphabet just to play and improvise. And here's how I've gotten so far. And I got to the letter C, or D, I mean, when I was approached to actually turn this into a project, a client project. An agency in Barcelona called Jorge Soto had this sort of side project agency that did a project called Notegraphy. And basically, they wanted me to do the very same thing, but create a full drop cap set, a full alphabet, using this, pretty much doing whatever I wanted, but I took this idea of improvising, sort of, I did a shape language for each letter, and turned it into a whole alphabet. And this is, in each letter had to have 3 color languages, or a mood. So this was called Dandelion. Again, getting back to my love of nature, and I thought it looked like, the swirly things are maybe wind, and the little dot seed things are maybe an interpretation of seeds. So you can use these drop caps to write little notes out to friends, family, or for yourself, and they're in your tablet, iPhone, or browser. So I like the idea of, when you blow on a dandelion, you make a wish and you blow it out into the world. I like the idea of this drop cap sort of taking your wish and spreading it. And this is the full alphabet drawn out, which consisted of about 40 hours of me locking myself in my apartment. And I like playing with shapes and integrating them into real objects. And so I draw a lot of birds, but really birds are about pattern and about exploring the feathers. So I got really obsessed with drawing owls for a little while, and playing with things within the construct. So you're drawing a bird, but it's really about playing with line, playing with color, playing with pattern, and playing with watercolor and messing up your drawings. This ended up being like 6 feet tall. Drawing characters from my favorite book. This is Mickey Wrangle from a Tom Robbins book, Still Life with Woodpecker. It's my favorite book. Got a little obsessed with drawing roosters for a little bit. I have a funny story about this one. It's got some potty humor, though. I'm going to tell it. So this was for a show, and I actually didn't really like this piece at first. I still don't really love it in particular, but this was, for some reason, was the hit at the show. And it was since my pieces are digital, I do limited edition prints for show stuff. And the 5 prints sold out within the first, like, I think 4 sold out before the show even opened. And people were trying to get more prints, and we're like, we're sorry, we don't have any more. And the curator showed me a text he got from one of his buyers, and it said, I will pay anything for the cock. That was the name of the piece. So I got really obsessed with drawing roosters, and then birds, and then peacocks. And then when I got sick of drawing real birds, I drew Alfred, who's the imaginary bird. And and I just would sort of get on these tracks and explore something, and then I would flip into portraiture. And portraits are sort of the same idea as type for me, where you have a construct, and you have to get that construct in place, and then you are free to play with whatever you want. And for portraits, it's of course get the eyes, nose, and mouth in place, and then whatever else you want to do, you're totally free to play because you can identify it at that point. So I started drawing this perspective series where faces are merging in and out of one another. Girls are super fun to draw because hair sort of works in the same way as feathers or plant life, where they just are really organic. So then I gave myself this sort of personal challenge called 100 Girls. It's a 100-girl portrait series, but it's more about sort of seeing your own evolution and noticing patterns in your own work when you're not really trying to do it for anything or anyone. Seeing it evolve over time. And I started noticing these patterns usually within a series of 2. And you'd start to see trends in color and pattern and shape. So I started getting really obsessed with these little scallop things, or a way of drawing the feather, or I started noticing that I was drawing all the mouths the same, or all the eyes the same. They'd have really enlarged eyes with like big, like red eyeshadow or something. And then I noticed patterns in like the waviness of the hair, the eyebrows. And I was doing this all unintentionally because I would just sort of zone out when I was doing it. I would maybe look at reference just to get eyes in place, and the angle of the head, and then everything else was just play. So I started noticing these patterns. And then I started noticing color language patterns, or lack thereof. This is about 14 or 15 in, and I started trying to strip down elements, and I started really liking how these were simpler than most of the like crazy rainbow vomit stuff that I make. At this point, my friend Arseny, who runs a great blog called Design Collector out of Russia, he set up this collaboration where artists would sort of play off one another. It was called Artist versus Artist, and Oleg Du makes these amazing ghost-like portraits. They are photos that he takes himself, and then he edits them so that they look like these, phantom characters. And my job was to interpret them in my style. So these were my interpretations, and they sort of turned into part of the series. And I started really loving the stripped-down quality, but I decided, I've drawn all these girls. Guys are really hard to draw because you have to really get everything right. You can't just like throw a swoop of hair over something if you draw their forehead wrong. So around this time, I was doing a commission for a gallery in Sydney, but it was actually about Spain, which is weird. And so I was like, cool, I'm going to draw Spanish painting masters to practice my male portraiture. So I drew Picasso and Miro, and then Tapias and Dali. And this is all just sort of like using assignments or jobs, not really job, but to practice what you're interested in. And I got these 4 done, and I was really liking the style and the direction of what I was learning for myself. But then I decided I needed to get better. I needed to push it and sort of work quicker and push it. And so I started torturing all of my poor friends. These were day projects, and I would draw my friends, and these were their deformed portraits. There's Josh Davis, Chuck Anderson, Karan Singh, and Su Gwen Chung. They're all creative people, or illustrators, or artists. And I would give myself a time constraint. I had a day to draw them and to Photoshop them, and I do them really quickly. And it was just about experimentation. They had no purpose, and I usually embarrassed the crap out of my friends when I gave it to them. But this is just something that I've, these are very early portraits where they were much more digital. They looked too computery, which I later tried to get away from, but it's something I've been doing, since I started. And this is really just to show how sometimes these actually turn into jobs, and that's super cool. But that can't be the reason for doing it, to get jobs. And this was for kind of a dream client. This is for Wired. I really love Wired magazine. This is actually for the German Wired. Super cool to be here. And these were columnist portraits, just from playing around. And then 3 years ago, also a client project, Nike approached me to do their House of Hoops store on 34th Street, and this was like mind-blowing to me. I live in New York. I love New York. Nike, at the time and still, is just an absolute dream client. That's like sort of the client everyone, when you're just starting out and really young, you're like, Nike, Nike, Nike. And I got commissioned to do these ginormous portraits. I'd never done anything this big, and I'd never drawn full-figured characters before, or portraits before. So it was really challenging, really daunting, huge learning experience, just in, like, even technically trying to create my files, which are Photoshop files, which are lots of layers. And I actually had to buy a new hard drive just to do this project. And also the reason all these photos are black and white was because I had to send my friend Dave in with his Leica, his film Leica, to, like, on the sly take these photos, because I got kicked out the first day trying to take pictures of, I was like, but I did those! And they didn't care. Those are the 3 I managed to get. So anyway, portraits, 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 repetition, and sometimes they lead to really awesome, unexpected stuff. And I'm going to show some skulls now, because I think they maybe count as portraits without skin. But I got on a little skull kick for 2012 for Doomsday Year. And these were just for fun. I did them on my mom's kitchen table when I was back in Virginia for the holidays, Christmas before last. And then it turned into a job. This was skulls for Scotch and Soda for a custom leather jacket they released. And then, again, doing a skull in a little different style. This is like more of a Japanese old school style for digital abstracts. It's a playing card set by Digital Abstracts. So that's sort of an overview of how I get really into drawing a subject matter and how I have no plan and just do it because it's fun. But the way that I sort of intervene in that is by documenting process, which is super important to me because I'm all self-taught. I had no idea when I started, and I generally still have no idea now. But I would always, always, always document in-process drawing just with a camera, because I think that adding your documentation adds another filter for you to be objective about something, about your own work, no matter what discipline. It's probably very subjective to you, and it helps you have some distance and separate yourself a little bit. So documenting process has always happened in the form of just photographs. You do it easy with your iPhone or your smart device if you don't have an iPhone. I always am biased there. And just it's just whatever stage you're in. Sometimes they help you decide when to stop, when to keep going, and they sort of help you see negative space from a different perspective. And I started doing this with the digital process, especially because no one ever taught me Photoshop. I was very insecure about it for a very long time until I realized that no one really knows what they're doing. And the best way really is to sort of find your own style with what tools you like, and you really don't need that much. So these are I'm going to show you a bunch of videos of my digital process, and these are pretty old. They're a little embarrassing to show, but that's cool, because you can see how I'm just like, I was really just playing around with color, had no idea when to stop, would go back, would go forward, redo the same work. So I'm just going to show them real quick and shut up for a second. she turned into this very sad-looking girl who has, for such a sad girl, she's got really psychedelic hair. I think I'd be pretty happy. And that gal, I didn't know if I wanted her to have lots of crazy color, or in the end, I, of course, decided to just make her monotone. But that was all sort of, I'd lay down the bright blue and be like, no, 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 no. And I've, it's more clear how that process happens by reflecting on the videos. This one's funny because this was for the same show that the Cox story was from, and I was working my agency job during the day, and I had just my nights and my weekends to complete about. It was a very large show it was my first show actually, and it was about 15 pieces, and I had no time. I had no idea what I was doing, and I had like, this was the last piece I had to do, and I messed up her mouth, and I just didn't want to redraw it. So when I got her into Photoshop, I was just like, here's I put a bit of dot on her face, and we ended up calling her the silent Mona Lisa, or she's a silent clown Mona Lisa. But it was just like a happy accident that came through the digital process. And in an ideal world, I wish I could do the same thing for the drawing process, because I think it works the same way. But it's really difficult to set up the camera and find your flow while you're worrying about a camera. But I had the great fortune of working with a cinematographer for a TED project where he documented the drawing of this TED logo. Magic. There, it's colored. So I wish I could do that all the time. Just have the process down of in video of drawing stuff, because I think you find happy surprises that you wish you could learn from and implement in future drawing. But that was an example of a large scale drawing that was also improvised. And I'll show you one more. Of the drawing. This was sort of one that I started at the TEDx lab, like in like a conference space, and got as far as I could get, and that's when I had to take it home because the conference ended, and continued sort of improvising with the drawing. I guess the point I'm trying to make with all this is have no fear and have fun, just like having no plan. And then this was also one more process video for, let me turn this down so I can talk. My friend Justin Maller runs Depthcore, which is a collective of artists that is, from all over the world, and we all contribute to what are called chapters, which are oriented around a theme. So you get all sorts of different styles. Some are fine artists, some are digital artists, some are really digital artists where they definitely look computer driven, and others look, like paintings. But he started this site/project where called Run Your Jewels, where every week while it was running, an artist would contribute a source file, PSD, Illustrator file, whatever the medium they worked in was. It would upload that, and then you could download it and remix it to look as close to the original or as far from the original as you wanted, and then you would vote, and there would be a winner. who did the best remix. So to accompany my contribution, I also did a screen flow to show people exactly how I made this, because anybody can do my process. I use like 3 tools in Photoshop. It's all hand-drawn. You have a scanner, you're ready to go. So I just showed how I made it, and then had all my assets in my folders, my BSD folders. I'm almost done, guys. All right, you guys get the idea. Almost done. So I guess I should sort of end with random point 3, as all great talks end with a quote, of course. Just kidding. Experience is simply the name we give to our mistakes. You know, you're solely responsible for your own success or failure, even though I don't like to say failure. And I think Oscar Wilde put this very wisely, because you know, it's not a mistake. It's just something you can ratchet up on your resume as having more experience. So I think we should, you know, listen to our inner child, not be afraid to fail, sort of pursue just what makes you happy, and improvise along the way. That's sort of been my mantra for all of the work I've done. It's not rocket science. It's just silly drawings. So on that note, thank you very much for listening to me. I'm Hello Zoe on all the internet things. Danke, danke, danke.